We've reached the midway point of the NFL season, and the Seahawks head into their bye week after a heartbreaking loss to the Rams. Joining me to discuss where Seattle goes from here, as well as to examine the league at large, is NFL Network and NFL.com's Gregg Rosenthal. Let's light him up.
I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my reclusive producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. And for as brutal of a loss as that was for the Seahawks on Sunday, the good news is the great Gregg Rosenthal is in the house to talk some ball with us. But before we get there, Cigar Thoughts is proud to be sponsored by Seattle Cigar Concierge and Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, two companies whose products I enjoy on a regular basis and that you see me enjoying on this show every week. Look, you already know the deal with these cigars. $149 for 10 cigars that sell for $350 to $400 on the open market. It's a killer deal. You can get them by following the link on the show page or going to cigarthoughtsnfl.com. These are extremely easy to smoke stogies, rolled again with 13-year-aged Dominican tobacco leaf. I can't tell you just how valuable that is when it comes to the quality of a cigar. So get some for yourself, get some as a gift. Again, $149 for a bundle of 10. The cigars, they come with a Boveda humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag, so they'll stay fresh whether you have a humidor or not. Feedback on these stogies has been awesome so far. We'd love yours as well. So thank you to all of y'all who have reached out. Say what you like about them. Like I said, they make a great gift. We're coming up on the holidays. So if you got a cigar lover in your life, this is an inexpensive way to get them some expensive cigars. And look, Mike and I love doing the show. And there are two ways y'all listening and watching can help support it so that we can keep the episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, which again, they come at an amazing price for the quality. The other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. Now look, the Seahawks came so close to winning this last game a bunch of times, but they couldn't capitalize in the biggest moments. And as a result, they head into the bye at 4-5 and grant their fans a much-needed reprieve after a brutal 6-game stretch. It's also an excellent opportunity to bring in today's guest to look at where this leaves Seattle, as well as lean into his expertise on the league at large. If you're a football fan, you likely know this man from his incomparable work for NFL.com, NFL Network, and as the co-host of my favorite rundown show, the NFL Daily. He is the ubiquitous Gregg Rosenthal. Gregg, thanks for making the time.
Well, thanks for helping me make me more ubiquitous. That's the goal.
Well, you're doing it, man. I can't escape you anywhere.
Yeah, maybe I'm sending out too many of those like podcast clips or whatever. Yeah, NFL Daily. It's in the title. So yeah, there's a lot of me on there.
No, it's great, man. You do an excellent job, which is why we're stoked to have you. And look, let's start with the Seahawks because, you know, the thing that I always try and keep in mind, and you know this, I'm a big picture guy because single data points of games, you honestly don't really get that many data points in a season. You get 17 of them, and it's hard not to get sucked into the most recent developments. And you know, we preached some cautious optimism when they jumped out 3-0 against bad quarterbacks, but we didn't expect it to turn this hard this quickly. I want to talk about the Rams game specifically. I expected the Rams to win that game, especially once we knew Puka Nacua was playing and DK Metcalf was not. And it just felt like McVay's had this team's number ever since he came into the division. Sure, it's a new coach who's given him some trouble before, but this felt like the Rams were the better team. And then Seattle went out and it felt to me anyway, like they outplayed the Rams for the majority of this game, except again, they get into, just like with Buffalo, they get into these high leverage situations and frankly, the offensive line just caves. As you watch that game with a little bit more detachment, what stood out to you?
That Geno outplayed Stafford, which I didn't expect because I did not watch that game live. We kind of assign out games. I assigned them out myself, and that was one I caught up during the week. And I was like, wow, the Seahawks defense finally looked like the defense that Mike Macdonald has been talking about, wanted to see, and Stafford's not really playing that well. They could have picked him off a few different times. The run defense was fine, that they played more than well enough to win. And if you isolate, most of Geno's day, the end of the first half and the end of the second half were just electric. They were incredible moments by the quarterback. And yet, you mentioned the high leverage plays, two of the interceptions, one comes on like a drop, the other one, it's like a broken play, which we see with the Seahawks offense so much, and they're holding the tight end that he's throwing it to. And so to me, it was a little bit of bad luck between two teams. I think that there is something ineffable in football that if you told me, like, that's how it played out, that makes sense to me, that the Rams are the team that ends up making the big plays in the big spot, at least where they are in the season and where the Seahawks have been. There's just like a little bit of sloppiness about the Seahawks, even on a day where their defense played pretty well.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the defense, because that was the thing that was supposed to be better. And again, I'm all about zooming out and was preaching patience on this. These guys are learning, the coordinator turnover in the NFL is insanely high these days. No one's with the team for more than 2 or 3 years. So these guys are used to learning new schemes. But based on my understanding of how different teams approach defense, you couldn't really ask for a much different language to be brought in from the types of defenses that Pete Carroll has been running, which hasn't involved a whole lot of movement. It's basically just line up, do your job, be better than the other team. And Mike Macdonald does a great job of really disguising what it is that he's trying to do in manufacturing pressure without blitzes and switching up coverages. And it just hadn't landed with Seattle. And then when it looked like the Rams were primed to go for 40, Kyren Williams under 3 yards per carry, Matt Stafford under 7 yards per attempt. Like, this looked like the type of defense that we were expecting. They were better against the Rams in this game than the Ravens defense was against the Rams last year when the Ravens won an overtime shootout. Yeah,
and they were certainly better than the Vikings defense, which was the number one defense, by DVOA in the league. Where just the week before, I think it's a great point that a lot of what Macdonald tried to do, it hasn't fully taken hold of guys playing fast, knowing their assignments. I think that's especially true at linebacker. Maybe Ernest Jones ends up helping them out a lot. I thought he had a good game. And yeah, they were playing fast. And that's another thing that hit me while I was watching this. I was like, oh, this is what they brought Macdonald here for. He's supposed to be the Shanahan McVay killer. And it actually was showing up. And they don't end up winning the game because of the turnovers in the red zone. And, because the defense, I guess, couldn't stop him in overtime. But, those were just crazy plays. That happens when you play Matthew Stafford. And Rick Willen, I guess Rick Willen has been a little bit of a surprise. I thought he was going to have an amazing season. And I would not say now I would categorize it as an amazing season.
Yeah, it's been so interesting with Reek because obviously he was such a revelation as a rookie. He was such a project. He is very Richard Sherman-esque, not in that his ceiling is Hall of Fame necessarily, but in that he was really learning the cornerback position at the NFL level after playing receiver in college. And he was so good. It was just so instinctive for him as a rookie. And Pete Carroll even talked about this, saying, he doesn't even know what he's doing out there. He's just reading and reacting. And then last year, he completely goes the other way. He's playing through a shoulder injury, and all of a sudden it's like, which Reek are we getting? The metrics love him, at least going into that game. And, he's had some really, really nice performances, but in those high leverage situations, and, we remember the plays that beat us, right? I think back to when your Patriots beat my Seahawks in the Super Bowl, that entire game, which again, I've just implored Seahawks fans everywhere, just go watch the condensed replay of that. It's cathartic. It's truly one of the better football games that I've ever watched. The whole thing gets reduced to that final play, right? Like nothing else that happened in that game matters. And, on a much smaller scale, when you look at this game against the Rams, I thought Woolen was actually pretty good in that game. You may feel differently, but then he had a chance to break up the impressive completion to Tyler Johnson, and then he's the one that gets beat for the game winner, Demarcus Robinson. I felt like the coverage is actually pretty good on that. Fantastic catch, perfect throw. Sometimes that just happens. But yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys where if this defense is ever going to become something close to what Macdonald had in Baltimore, he has to be a big part of it.
Yeah, and he has been, to be fair. You're absolutely right. The first month of the season, especially, I thought he came out strong, and maybe I'm just remembering how it ended. I'm glad you said that about the Patriots Seahawks. I've been I think I had to come up with a list sometimes, like what's the best Super Bowls, what's the best football game, and that was my easy choice, and it wasn't because of the ending. It was because it was a rare year where there were really two great teams, and the two best teams, which would have been the best teams in any year just about, played each other in the Super Bowl, and the game that they played had everything that you wanted out of it. It had great moments for Brady and certainly Russell Wilson, but you also had great defensive moments throughout and runs and back and forth. And they were just two really balanced, two Hall of Fame coaches. It couldn't have been better. And you're right, it gets reduced down to my guy Malcolm Butler, but why not?
Yeah, totally. and right. And
this is obnoxious. To get on. You shouldn't have me on every year to just talk about the Super Bowl.
No, well, I think that game, more than any other in my lifetime as a Seahawks fan, gave me an understanding of football on its own. Like I said, in a way no other game has, because there's so much nuance that goes into that outcome, and it's really informed me both intellectually and emotionally in my approach to football in the decades since that happened. And you're right, it was awesome. It was an amazing back and forth game between two, I think, all-time great teams. And so, you get a little bit of that. I bring it up not to twist the knife to majority of the people who are watching and listening to this show, but to say that, we as human beings, we have a million things going on in our lives. And it's, I think, helpful for us to just reduce certain things to something very simple so that we can put it in a box and get back to, our families, the things that are stressing us out at work, the toothache that we can't stop thinking about, all of these things. And so it really does take effort to live in the gray area. And I actually came out of that Seahawks game encouraged by a lot of things. One thing I was not encouraged by was the offensive line, who continues to get obliterated. And it's one thing if you just aren't good enough to block the guy in front of you. Seattle's been dealing with that all year. But it's little stuff like all of a sudden Connor Williams has turned into Chuck Knobloch at the center position. Like it seems like he just has the yips. You could even see him guiding some of those shotgun snaps. And that's going to make you slower on your reaction to the guy that you're blocking in front of you. And I look at the highest leverage plays in this game. You mentioned the first interception. That was straight up a drop by Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. And I definitely want to circle back to JSN in this game. But the other two, right after the 103-yard pick six that Geno threw, I said that's his worst play as a Seahawk. And maybe it is, because he could have thrown it away earlier in that play. The thing is, when Geno makes the great plays, it's because he is willing to stand in the maelstrom behind a bad offensive line and take the gambles. And he just held onto that ball too long. His arm was hit. He said he was trying to throw it away. On the second one, AJ Barner, they're running a little slip screen to him. First of all, every offensive lineman on that play gets blown back 1.5 yards in the first step. So he's high stepping between the heels of all of his offensive linemen. And frankly, he just gets held. And Geno, that's a one-read play for Geno. He's throwing, guy gets held, goes right to the defender. It looks terrible in real time. He came back at the end of that game with a flamethrower. And again, just like we don't talk about Jermaine Kearse's incredible catch that led to the Malcolm Butler interception in that Super Bowl. No one's going to talk about him diming up JSN from 35 yards on a sick deep corner route on 4th and 5, and then just whipping a ball from the opposing hash mark for a 15-yard score on the next play. That gets lost, right? Because they lost the game and he threw 3 interceptions. The discourse on Seahawks Twitter after that game, predictably, was how Geno's not the guy. And I want to be open to that. I don't want take lock, because I came into his Seahawks tenure being like, it doesn't matter if he or Drew Lock wins the starting job because they're going to be gone after this year. And I had to step back from that because Geno was excellent in 2022. But since then, it's just been like, oh, he's not good enough. You need to burn it down. You need to find the quarterback of the future. And sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because I'm like, how many quarterbacks can you put in this situation and expect better results?
I mean, he's been fantastic this year. I'm shocked by that local reaction, and I have picked up a little bit of it on Twitter, and you do a great job with your podcast, and I hear Sean Michael Dugar's podcast, and it's just like it's crazy to me that Geno would be taking much heat about this at all. For instance, that game is a perfect example. I went afterwards. I'm like, I was curious how PFF would grade it. It's like Geno had a much higher grade in that game because I thought so too. When I went through my notes, like I thought he outplayed Stafford in that game. That was not a good game by Stafford overall. He lucked out on a couple should have been interceptions, and until the very end, he couldn't really get anything done. But that is what you remember. Geno had 7 big time throws in that game, which I'm guessing there's only been 5 games all year by any quarterback that would have that many. And he had
without
2
DK Metcalf
plays. He only had
without DK Metcalf.
Right. He only had 2 turnover-worthy plays, whereas Stafford, I think, had a couple big-time throws and 3 turnover-worthy plays and ended up having a lower grade. And you just see that a lot. Now, their interior line at this point seems like a death knell to the ceiling of like making the NFC Championship or something. It seems like such a big weakness that they literally couldn't overcome it enough to get to where they want to go. Now, if the defense can come together like Mike Macdonald's first defense in Baltimore did as the season went along, and they look like they did on Sunday, and get a little more consistent running game, be able to get a yard for Geno in the passing game, in overtime. And that's how the game ended, is they just could not get a yard. Get a little more consistency there, and you have DK Metcalf on the field. Then you're a spicy team. You're a good team. You're very possibly a playoff team, and you can go have some fun. It's hard to imagine the line getting better enough that that's not going to kill them at some point, in the playoffs if they get there.
Yeah. It's so tough because it takes pages out of your playbook when you don't trust an offensive line to stand up to what they're faced with. Like, you can't get under center and run play action. That is the big. We had Mina Kimes on last week, and we were talking about the biggest weakness with this Rams defense is play action passing. Like, that's how you can really beat this team. How are you going to put Geno Smith under center and then have him turn his back to the defense for 3 steps with this offensive line? The only play action they can run is out of shotgun, because that's the only way you can keep Geno's eyes forward. And I thought that he was exceptional in this game. And let's just use this opportunity to talk about Jacson Smith in Jigba, because that's been frustrating for a lot of people. He was a receiver I was very high on. I think collectively, the NFL universe was very high on coming out of Ohio State. And then he's just been somewhat of a screen merchant. He's being used like, one of the Wandale or Rondale. Just give him the ball as close to the line of scrimmage as possible and hope he gets you 6 yards. This game, his route chart was stunning, and he had another 71 yards that were called back on penalties that had nothing to do with him. And so 180 yards, could have been 250. And, Geno could have had a 450, 500 yard game very easily. I don't want to just sound like it's rose colored glasses. This team has lost 5 of 6. But I'm really willing to put this on run defense and their offensive line play. I was so encouraged by both Geno Smith and Jackson Smith-Njigba in this game. And I'm wondering if you feel like this gives Ryan Grubb license to start moving JSN further down the field, even with DK Metcalf back.
Yes. I don't think you're fully taking advantage of what this offense can do unless you do that. Because to me, Smith-Njigba is just, at this point, a player I would put higher in the pecking order than Tyler Lockett. Not sure. Like, you can tell me where you think Lockett is at. He's always been like the guy who everyone's like the most underrated receiver in the league. I think at this point, he's certainly not at his peak. And I understand just
he's
2023.
Yeah, to me, he's 2023 Tyler Boyd.
Okay, well, that's not good.
Right. 2022, maybe. I mean, a better third option than most teams have. But I think at this point in his career, if you have to build your passing attack around him, you're going to be limited.
Right. He really makes a lot less sense without DK on the field next to him. But also, yes, I think JSN making those plays and showing what he can do in that situation is a positive of DK being out. Geno's going to let his guys go make plays. It's one reason why I think he's having this renaissance, is that he's going to have the confidence in his guys if they show him that they can do it. And he's got to have a lot of confidence in JSN after that game. So that is something to build on. They have enough skill position talent. They do. I think they have enough defensive talent. We've talked about the offensive line, but overall it's enough talent. They haven't shown the ability to coach up the offensive line like the staff before, which is, I think, the most disappointing thing about Ryan Grubb right now is maybe the lack of, maybe he just feels he can't have enough diversity in the offense, but the lack of cohesion on that line, because offensive line play is, getting an average offensive line is not really all about just premier talent. It's about coaching, I think, more than any position group on the field, and it's just not taking hold for them.
Yeah. And Grubb brought his offensive line coach from the University of Washington with him, Scott Huff. And that was, they were officially lauded as the best offensive line in college football last year. And we had Dave Mahler, Softy, on before the season, who's very, very close to the UW program. And I asked him, I was like, is it just because they out-recruited everybody? And he's like, no, they recruited good linemen. But it was not the best recruiting class of the O-line. Like, they were coached up. And so I was very encouraged, especially once they brought in Connor Williams, that it was like, okay, maybe we got something here. And it has just kind of fallen apart, or at least never got put together, is probably more accurate.
And they're on their third tackle, and they're replacing Connor Williams.
But that's the whole NFL
injury. There are reasons for it. Charles Cross has maybe been a little disappointing the last month or so, but there are reasons for it. But just it's just like the level of incompetence is tough to watch as a Geno stan.
No, that's what we want from you, man. Like, we're not having you on here to tell us that everything's going to be okay. We want the real talk, which is why we had you. And another thing that I was been really looking forward to over the last couple of weeks with having you on, I've been just thinking about this for a few weeks now, and I thought you were the perfect person to just kind of debut this with on the show. And it's just, I'm sure the branding could use some tweaking here, but just the worry meter, now that they are sub 500 for the first time all year. It's amazing because it feels like, oh my gosh, they're just a trash team. They're 4-5. They're a game out of first place in their division, whatever. They're in the middle of the bell curve of the NFL, but they do have a losing record now. And it makes sense for fans to start to get anxious. So I'm going to run through just a few different aspects of this team, a few different people. And I want you to tell me how worried from 1 to 10 you are. And framing is everything. So the context I'm going to give you for this is, I've always felt that 2024 was going to be a diagnostic year for this coaching staff. Everything is so different. You got to learn what you have. So you want to see them be competitive this year as a Seahawks fan. But if they don't win the division, don't make the playoffs, it's not the end of the world for me. However, no question that by 2025, you need to be competing for a division title. And by 2026, feel like this is a team capable of a real playoff run. So with the framing of 2025, taking a step forward, 2026, taking another step forward, how worried are you about the following people's ability to get them there? I'm going to start at the top with Mike Macdonald?
Oh, wait, it's 1 to 100?
No, 1 to 10. 1 to 10.
1 to 10, and 10 would be the most worried.
Yes.
At this point, like a 3.5. Mm-hmm. They're pretty close to expectations so far. I'm willing to give him a pretty wide berth. You know, you look at DVOA, which is a good catch-all sort of efficiency metric. They're 18th in the league overall. They're like 17th on defense, surprisingly lower than I would expect on offense, maybe the turnovers, 15th on offense. And if you just told me that kind of coming into the year, I'd say, yeah, you know, I would want the offense to be a little better. I think how he addresses the team, addresses the media, has given me no concerns. I think I think he has his players wanting to play hard. Like overall, the defense has been so up and down. It's almost hard to know what to take from it. I know they beat up on bad opponents early, but it also, you know, it looked great. And so not that worried. I'm just sort of in a wait and see mode. Like maybe like slightly more worried than I was at the beginning of the year. So I'll give him a 3.5.
Sure. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. I'm going to try and disagree with you if I can on some of these, but that's right in line with where I'm at. Right underneath him, Ryan Grubb, much heralded offensive coordinator, inherited an offense with some obvious strengths, some obvious weaknesses. How worried would you be about his ability to help them take the next step?
See, I'm a patient, optimistic person who wants to, like, I understand how long the NFL season is and how the number one things fans do is like worry so much in the moment about like the journey. I'm a Boston Celtics fan, and like I swear Celtics fans didn't even enjoy last season, and they were like one of the best teams of all time. They were just panicked and hating everything the whole time. It's like they were amazing. Anyways, because of the offensive line, I'm going to give him a higher score than Macdonald, and yeah, just the offense little disjointed at points. So I'll give it like a 5.5. To me, that's still fairly low. I'm not overly worried, but I think there's been more signs on the offense, specifically because of the line, because you have a quarterback that's doing so many things for you in terms of getting you into the right place, such a smart quarterback. I love their belief in Geno and that they love him, and I really think he's going to end up being their quarterback long term. I fully expect that to get done. So it's really just like the line play bumps it up a couple notches. I'll give it a 5.
Yeah, I'm kind of there too. You know, one of the things that's so difficult. I looking at this roster, I don't have a dog in the hunt in terms of, do I want a team objectively to be more run heavy or more pass heavy? What I want teams to do is put wind into their mainsail. And with Seattle the last few years, yes, they have been a higher pass rate team than most people think when they think of a Pete Carroll team. This year, it's out of control. They're passing the ball like 70% of the time in neutral game situations. I don't think anyone wants that. I don't think Don Coryell wants to pass the ball 70% of the time. And yet, when you don't, even with someone that I think is very, very talented runner in Ken Walker, it doesn't matter if he's dodging the first guy 2 yards in the backfield. At some point, he's going to have to find a way to counterpunch because, like you said, I don't see how they coach up the offensive line. Now, maybe Abe Lucas comes back, and if he's 90% of the guy he was as a rookie, that's going to have a domino effect down the line. That should help. But, I mean, at some point, you just have to figure out some things you can do on offense to account for an insane pressure rate. Geno Smith was pressured on 57% of his dropbacks, which I think was the second highest rate of any quarterback all season long. And he still put up probably one of the 5 best games of his career, interceptions notwithstanding. Damn. But yeah, at some point, you got to counterpunch.
I get it, but like they came out, it was as if Grubb was listening to the podcast, and that was one moment where I didn't like them this season. I forget what game it was. They went super pass heavy early in the season, and Macdonald wore the run the damn ball, and then they're like, we're gonna run it this week, you know, and then they really went run heavy and it didn't work. They had a little bit of that going into this Rams game too, where they're just like, we're just gonna stick with the run no matter what early. Right. And I think they ran on like a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5 early in the game. They had like another run stuff. It's like, yeah, you can run, but it wasn't really. I know they popped more runs in that game once they stuck with it. But like early on, it was not working. I was like, you can try to do this to prove a point, but you're going to need to see results too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Broncos game to start the season, they couldn't run for shit in the first half. And to their credit, they stuck with it and won that game on the ground in the second half. They ran into similar issues. I think they came out trying to run the ball against the Patriots in week 2. Couldn't do it, leaned a little bit more into Geno middle of the game, and then turned it back over to the run game down the stretch. But ever since then, they just, and positive game script against Skylar Thompson week 3. Ever since, they haven't really been able to do it. And you're right. They tried to force the issue early on, but again, less than 3 yards per carry, which is like, I think in all 5 of their losses, they've been at or below 3 yards per carry. YPC is not the most nuanced stat ever, but over a large enough sample size, it gives you a pretty decent idea of how a run game is performing. And that's just absurd with a runner of Ken Walker's quality. All you got to do is just get that guy past the line of scrimmage and let him see what he does. Another friend of the show and someone that I know does a phenomenal job is Ben Solak. And he tweeted out after the game that right now Seattle's average third down yards to go is 8.9, which is the highest of any team on record in the NFL.
It's crazy.
And that's all offensive line. That is, you're either getting sacked, snapping the ball over the quarterback's head for a loss of 25, or you can't run.
Second and 35 the other week definitely was not helping. Although actually they got back to third down and 9. That was a good play by Geno.
He made a brilliant.
That was Ken Walker. Actually, it was like a little dump off, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was, and then they would have converted that third down because he put it right on JSN for the first down on the next play, and he dropped it. But it's one of those things where, okay, yeah, it would be great to lean into the run, but if you're only getting 2 yards a carry, it's really tough to avoid third and long. And at some point, defenses just know, look, these guys, they already know it's a 70% chance they're going to pass anyway. You know, it's tough. So, okay. The next guy we've talked about a little bit, Geno Smith, a lot of consternation about him in Seahawks fandom right now. I think it's ridiculous. I think that if we're willing to put the effort in to have a more nuanced opinion of his play. And my goal is always to just understand football better, wherever that puts me, opinion wise, when it comes to my favorite team. I look at what Geno's doing, and like my worry meter on him is like a 1 or a 2.
I'd go, 2, because my only worry is that the situation around him is just going to get him trying to play, too much, get him into bad habits, trying to have him play hero ball a little too much. But that's really more the situation than Geno. He's a top 10 quarterback, I think, in the league. So. He's right around, in that area. Like if everything was great around him, I think he'd put up incredible stats. Like maybe he's not top 5, but he wouldn't be that far behind that. And yeah, my worry, I think you've got the right quarterback for this system too, I think, which puts a lot on the quarterback. And I think letting him grow in this system too is going to help, because it's actually very impressive how I think quickly he took ownership of this system, and we're only half a season in and one training camp. And I actually believe the coaches and how much they back him. And that's why I do think that contract's happening, whether Seahawks fans like it or not. I know the next half of season makes a difference of what that's going to be, but yeah, the worry meter is very low.
Yeah, I was texting with Mina this morning, and she said that she had some access to some advanced analytics about Geno Smith when it comes to first read versus second read that I think really highlights the challenges with this offensive line. So, per Mina Kimes, on his first read, he is second in success rate behind only Lamar. He's first in accuracy, but 15th in EPA per dropback because of the sacks. 10th in DVOA on his first read. On his second read, that drops to 28th in DVOA. He drops to 14th in success rate, 11th in accuracy, And on quick releases where it's just hit the top of your drop and throw, he is first in accuracy and fifth in success rate. When he has the ability to throw the ball cleanly, he's not only top 10, he has been top 5 across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see that. I mean, he's an ultimate, watch the tape guy. It's just like you go through his 40 plays and you're like, give me the negative plays. Give me the things that you would do differently depending on the situation. We'll see. Get him some protection. Not worried.
Yeah. Yep. Another bewildering firebrand to me among Seahawks fans, DK Metcalf. Your thoughts on DK Metcalf as the part of the future of this team 25, 2026 if they're going to really try and contend?
Oh, the worry meter? I mean, it's not that complicated. He's not A.J. Brown. I like how you framed this entire conversation of how to set the expectations, because don't expect him to be A.J. Brown, who has gotten better and better and is just at a level that I didn't ever expect him to get. To me, he and JJ Jefferson would be the two best wide receivers in the league, I think, right now. But he's not that. But it's so hard to find difference-making wide receivers. Like, wherever you want to put him in the pecking order, maybe he's not, like, as complete as some of the very top guys. Who cares? Like, he's the 10th best receiver in the league. He's a huge difference maker. He tilts the coverage. He has a very defined and strong skill set. He is still getting better and is a relatively young player that is going to have many more years of his prime. So, yeah, I mean, send him to New England, please. I mean, imagine how much the Patriots, like Drake May, could use a DK Metcalf. Are you kidding me? I mean, you guys probably have a different view of the Patriots, because that was the best game the Patriots played all season. I swear was week 2. That was easily the peak of their season. I came out of that week, I was like, this is actually a real football team. It's a normal real football team. And
you just beat the Bengals. I mean, come on, juggernaut.
Even that game was like a bad team winning without, by not making mistakes. Against the Seahawks, it was like, hey, these are just two pretty decent teams going at it. They look pretty even. They've looked like the worst team in the NFL since then. So yeah, I mean, it's a long way of saying, like, my God, DK Metcalf is an asset, a home run as a pick where you took him and just pay him.
Yeah, it's something I've written before and I've probably said on this show. I think your opinion of DK Metcalf says more about you than it does about DK Metcalf. Like, what are you focusing on? Because the things he does well, he does better than almost everybody. And there are obvious shortcomings in his game, but taken on the whole are not really that deleterious to his overall contribution to this team. And you can just see it when you look at how safeties line up when DK Metcalf is on the field and when he's not. I mean, they're 4 yards, 5 yards closer. They're not shading a safety over to his side. Like, he opens up so much. He just has gravity, is the word I always use for him. He's got gravity that no one else on this team has.
And he makes some mistakes, but he also makes spectacular high difficulty catches too. He reminds me of T.O. in that way, where it's like, for half of T.O.'s career, everyone would talk about, oh, but he has like 8 drops a year. It's like, yeah, but he has so many incredible catches, and he changes the coverage of everything that you do. And DK's a lesser version of that, but he is a version of that. And there's only a couple versions of that in the entire NFL.
Yeah. And it's funny, if you go and you look at the league leaders in drops every year, the top 10 leaders in drops are going to be 10 of the best wide receivers in the NFL, because it's reflective of volume. And it just, when you get more opportunities, the pure volume of your mistakes is going to be a little bit higher. All right. Last one in this little game here is the one that I'm actually the most curious about and that I'm still trying to find my feet on. John Schneider.
Ooh, good one. 7. I'll give him the highest of here. I would be the most worried. It's really his team now. I think the difficulty in thinking about what his vision is going to be and separating out what was his responsibility before and what wasn't. And now I put a lot on him. I think it's his team in terms of he's got to find Mike Macdonald, the players that fit Mike Macdonald's system, and this is the coach that he picked. But he has more control and power than he's ever had, and he's only 1 year into that. And so I just think the only healthy way to run a franchise is that the coach and the GM have to be aligned. So I don't think he should be someone that his job would be in any jeopardy for a while. Really, him and Macdonald need to be together, I think. You got to give it time because it really is a restart. That said, he's been running pretty cold on the draft picks, and the personnel decisions on balance have been average, I would say, for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, he charged onto the scene with arguably the greatest 3-year stretch of drafting that this league has ever seen or ever will see. And frankly, in my opinion, has been trading in on that for a decade. And it's tough because, yes, he's had some hits for sure. But overall, it appears that Schneider has very distinct, very clear hierarchies in terms of what positions he values and which ones he doesn't. And it is extremely clear that he hasn't valued spending money on the offensive line. I'm not sure he's ever had an offensive lineman that has spent more than 4 years with Seattle. He's used first round.
That's crazy.
In 15 years. Right?
That's a huge shortcoming. That's why it's at 7. Because otherwise, now I'm thinking about the defense, even the picks lately, like even the Leonard Williams acquisition. In general, like he has at least as many good picks, even in the last handful of years or more than most guys. The drafts haven't been bad. It's just hard to separate him from Pete.
Right.
So I think you got to kind of see how this goes.
I think where I'm at with John Schneider at this point is you get 2025. You get a second year with Mike Macdonald. Approach free agency with Macdonald's feet underneath him, not being the new kid in class, feeling like he can speak up and, is friends with the other kids in the class type of thing. But after next year, if this offensive line isn't top 20, at some point you just have to take a different approach. And, he's a strong believer in not going first wave free agency, which is fine. I think that there's some real value to that. That said, decisions like letting Jordan Brooks walk, who I think has been spectacular in Miami and who I thought was awesome in Seattle. You save a little bit of money by bringing in Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker on 1-year contracts. And it's almost kind of like Moneyball, right? Like, okay, Jason Giambi's gone, but we can recreate him in the aggregate. Well, now instead of getting one decision right, you have to get 3 decisions right in a row. And like, you can do it, but your odds of doing that are much less. And, Baker's gone 6 weeks into the season. Now, Ernest Jones looks like the real deal. And hopefully he can kind of stabilize things. But when you look at the interior of the offensive line and the second level personnel over the last 5 years, it's tough because no matter how well they've done at these other positions, the negatives of those 2 spots on this roster have dragged everything back to the middle.
See, I'm just assuming Mike Macdonald's got to have a big hand in the linebacker decisions. I don't know. If
he was the linebackers coach. That's
right.
Why I was okay with the decision is I was like, all right, well, I'm going to trust the greatest linebacker coach.
Right. And his defense really depends on having strong linebacker play, which is why it hasn't really worked this year because that's just the position that if you want to be the McVay or Shanahan, killers, and they did a good job against the Rams, and then you got to get good linebacker play. And, I thought Ernest Jones, to my eye, had a great game, and that was really encouraging. And maybe he will be a long-term answer there because he's going to be a free agent coming up, and you get him signed. So I got to feel like Macdonald has a hand in those sorts of decisions, and we'll see how they work together moving forward. But it's the 2 of them are going to have to figure out how to fix an offensive line, which in theory is not Mike Macdonald's expertise, and it's definitely not been John Schneider.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. All right, so for those listening, I listen to a lot of football podcasts, read a lot of football articles. I want to be as informed as possible, not just as a fan, but I don't want to step in front of the camera and just shit out bad takes either. Like I want to have good reasons for believing what I believe, and there is literally nothing that does a better job of informing me of that than your recaps on Monday, which maybe you record them Sunday night, but when I listen to them on Monday, where you give the rundown of every single game, and I don't know how you do it, it's awesome. So I say that just to emphasize how excited I am to talk about the NFL at large with you and stop talking about this dumb team for a few minutes. One of the things that you bring up on your show regularly is your quarterback island. Talk to us about that.
Oh, yeah. That's the brainchild of one of our regular co-hosts, Jordan Rodriguez of The Athletic. She's awesome. And
she is.
It's been a running monthly segment where there can only be 12 quarterbacks on the island at all times. Although, who knows? We might add some twists later in the season. We'll see. And yeah, just instead of ranking them, kind of who is defining the position right now, who is playing the best right now, who would we want on the island? It was interesting because this last time around, Kyler was the last guy who got on, and that was him getting on for the first time. Geno got on when we did the first regular season edition of it after 4 weeks of the season. Did not start the season on it despite me pushing, but his play got him on, and he stayed on. The entire NFC West is on the island, which is
I was going to ask that exact question. Yeah, I think the quarterback play in that division is wild.
Yeah, and look, all four of them are at the back half. I would say, like Kyler was probably the last guy on, and Geno, was maybe like the third to last guy that stayed on there. So that would have had him, if we were ranking, it was like 10th. And Brock and Stafford were, at the back half there too. So, but they're all playing at a high level. Stafford to me actually was the one I would say this season. I actually think and I know he hasn't had Puka and Cooper Kupp, but even the Seahawks game, I think has been a little more inconsistent on a week-to-week basis. But yeah, it's just it is interesting to hear everyone else's opinion. Steve Weiss is always on that show with me and Jordan and Colleen Wolfe, and trying to come to a consensus and realizing, even despite the offensive line struggles, like a guy like CJ Stroud, it still was like a no doubter. He to me has a lot of similarities to Geno, maybe a younger, even more exciting version of it, that even though he was under a lot of pressure and the numbers aren't as good, going into that Jets game, it was before it when we did our last QB Island, it was like Hughes was still a no doubter, just because if you watch the games, you just know he's that dude.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not going to ask you to preview the next iteration. I know it's a collaborative effort, but can you tell me who the 12 that are currently on the island are?
I got ready for this. So yeah, it was the entire NFC West. Justin Herbert snuck on last time, which is feeling good. Since the bye week, he is playing that well. Jaden Daniels got on after 4 weeks and is an MVP candidate in my mind. And then the top guys who have kind of just stayed where they are is Lamar, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, not in this order necessarily, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen. Stroud would be like a little tier below, but he's been a solidly on, and that's your 12. I think I got them all. Oh, Jared Goff.
I was going to ask, is Goff not on this? Because
no,
you go a month with more touchdowns than incompletions. You gotta at least get you a hut on the island somewhere.
I have to admit, after 4 weeks, I was like, I don't know. He actually didn't play that well to start the season the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then he had that big game against the Seahawks, and that kind of saved his spot. And I'm glad he did stay on, because all you can do is what you are asked to do at a high level, and he has very particular strengths. It's kind of like going back to our Geno and DK conversation. Like, those are guys that have very obvious strengths. Can you find a coach in a situation that knows how to accentuate those strengths? Because they're obviously there. And Jared Goff is an extreme example of that. but the Lions have done such a great job doing that. But he's done it himself too. He had those strengths to begin with. He had them with the Rams too.
So I mean, that's a strong list. And the thing that I appreciate about Quarterback Island is you're not getting caught up in the minutia of who's 8th versus who's 9th or whatever. It's just, here are the 12 you want if you only get 12 to choose from. If those are all the names, some notable exceptions appear to be Tua, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins. Are
Kirk
they?
Was
I
tough
mean,
for me to leave off Jalen Hurts. Like,
Hurts,
for all this stuff about like, the NFL can't develop quarterbacks. It's like we just rattled off about 18 pretty good quarterbacks here. Like,
that's right.
When was this time in NFL history where quarterbacks were coming out of the draft and half of them weren't busts, and that, like, everyone's always complaining about the state of quarterback. And I look at those names. I actually would have had Cousins on the list, but I got outvoted. I think he's been playing better than Stafford, and to me has been such a central character. I do it this way. The other ones don't as much, but like, to me, he's such a main character of this season that's a little extra sauce.
Yeah.
Just he's given us so much, and he's doing it in such a weird way that I'm just like, I would put him over Stafford. Stafford's a little bit of a supporting character so far to me.
Yeah. That's, I mean, the swagless surf. I mean, it's so funny because he's like culturally feels like so much a better fit in Minnesota than he is in Atlanta.
It's crazy.
But he's, and like,
you guys
leaned
saw
in.
That his absolute worst too. That game was rough.
Sure.
He can't move. That's the thing that gets me. He literally can't move, and he's getting it done, which to me is
just
amazing.
Such high level processing.
He's like Peyton Manning in the year Peyton Manning fell apart, except he's actually balling. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a number of quarterbacks waiting in the wings. I mean, I think Baker Mayfield still leads the NFL in touchdown passes. Tua has obviously had an offense and some personnel tailored to his strengths that hide his weaknesses. But I think that, he's a very good quarterback. I like Jordan Love a lot. So I bring that up not to say like, oh, you need to get these guys on the island, but for Seahawks fans to just highlight what it means for Geno Smith to be on this island when some of these very good, very professional, very accomplished quarterbacks are not.
Right. I mean, it hurts me to not have Jordan Love there, because if you just needed to put together a highlight reel of the 10 best throws of the year, every quarterback put their 10 best throws on a tape. I mean, that dude is just fearless. He is everything.
He's
right
awesome.
Now. And I had a hard time not arguing for him. And Kirko's numbers are great. Baker Mayfield's numbers are great. Jalen Hurts has played very well over the last month. Tua's been hurt, so he hadn't really been a discussion, so he'll be a discussion next time around. You're right. It's actually a sneaky deep time for quarterbacks for all the complaining about it. The rookies are good. Like, Jaden Daniels is incredible. Drake May, feel great about. And
you got to be feeling great about Drake May.
I do, but I also do think they are in as bad a shape organizationally and just everything wise, coaching staff and roster combined, as literally any team in the NFL. Like, I'd rather be them than a handful of teams because they have Drake May. But other than that, I think they're probably the worst team in the NFL. So it's a yin and yang,
Well, it's such a difficult test for a young quarterback, because if I've kind of changed my opinion on anything holistically about the NFL over the last 5 years, I lean way further into the importance of nurture over nature when it comes to the success of a quarterback. I've long believed that if quarterback's good enough, he will be the tide that raises all ships. And we've seen some quarterbacks come in and do that. We've seen Herbert and Burrow and Stroud get drafted into situations that didn't seem great and immediately be good. But there's so many others that, Trevor Lawrence being at the top of the list, where it's just like, man, what do you do when you're not being set up to succeed? It's so difficult to overcome.
It is. And yet the way we're talking about Drake May, I think, goes back to the way you originally viewed things, which is how I've viewed things for the most part. And I think it's probably more nuanced now that, like, we're already talking about Drake May in such a way that we were never talking about Zach Wilson or Sam Darnold at the Jets, or or Trey Lance or whatever. So you can see it. It's kind of like in the CJ Stroud games lately where things are starting to collapse on him and he's definitely pressing a bit. You can still see the CJ Stroudness of him inside. So it's both, but you need to have support. Trevor's a guy I've always struggled with. Yep. I don't know if it's all there. I do think there's something missing.
It feels like it at this point, right? I mean,
I thought
they gave him the bag, man.
Confirmation bias, but yes, I think so.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, he's the 45 home run hitter that strikes out 250 times. I mean, the greatness is great, and you love his chances of making the big time throw, but there's a chance he's just gonna just kill you with a mistake.
The real greats, I think, are going to be great in multiple situations and ways that their careers played out. There is a tier below where it's like, yes, if Lawrence can find the right situation, if he was in Minnesota right now, would he be playing better than Sam Darnold and have great numbers? Yes, I fully believe that. But sure, that just means he's still a tier below the Aaron Rodgers, in terms of looking at his old career, or Brett Favre,
right?
Or,
of course,
the great,
yes, Yeah, absolutely. All right, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but if you had to bet $10,000 right now, of your own money, you win $50 if you get it right. Who's the next coach fired?
Mike McCarthy.
You think Jones does it? I'm right there with you in terms of like performance versus expectations. I just wonder if Jerry actually pulls the plug midseason after sticking with Jason Garrett for as long as he did.
Well, there's only two options for this. There's actually only two guys I think that are on the hot seat where they could get fired in season. So it's Doug Peterson or Mike McCarthy. I just get the sense based on the public comments that Jerry's had it with this team. Now, maybe Dak's injury weirdly takes the pressure off during the season, and the expectations now are so low. I think in Vegas, they do bet on this. I've not looked at it. My guess would be that Peterson is the decent size favorite, and then McCarthy would probably be next, and maybe Dable would be next. But I personally actually don't think Dable is in that much hot water. I think the Giants want to ride that through.
Yeah, and I think I would if I was the Giants. The two that would be at the top of my list would be Peterson and Antonio Pierce. Because I didn't really get a sense that Pierce was hired as you are the future of the Raiders. It was like, hey, you got thrown into the mix and in the middle of a bad season and beat the Chiefs and then blew out the Chargers by 60 points. Here's your contract. But that team fucking stinks, man.
You're right. One of the reasons I didn't think that would be the case would be, how many coaches is Mark Davis paying right now? Is he still paying John Gruden? Maybe he got out of that contract because of everything that happened. But
I had not considered that. Yeah,
he's paying so many different coaching staff.
And he's the poorest owner in the NFL, which is a wildly under-discussed aspect of ownership.
Is that true anymore? Because
maybe not anymore since the move to Vegas. That might not be the case.
Stadium is printing cash. It's the most expensive. Those are secondary market tickets, but it's literally the most expensive ticket in the league. They have such a great fan base. Now Tom Brady's involved. Although, as you were talking, it got me thinking, Antonio Pierce was the middle linebacker of the Giants team.
Sure was.
That beat Tom Brady.
I've had this thought.
And here's why Tom Brady is an owner. It's the same reason why Fox gave him $30+ million a year. Is the executives just want to hang out with Tom Brady and ask him questions and stuff. So that's true at Fox, and for the Raiders, it's Mark Davis just wants to hang out with Tom Brady and ask him questions and probably let him make some decisions or be involved in decisions. And so you might be onto something, because when there's a new owner involved, then coaches.
One thing Tom Brady is not going to do with an ownership stake in an NFL team, I'm confident of, is not make any noise as you lose week after week after week.
The funny thing is, no one will ever really know. Maybe they'll be reporting about it, but he won't put his fingerprints on it or whatever. But Mark Davis will suddenly be making decisions that Tom Brady tells him to. So that's a strong one. Do you want to go some wild cards of off season?
Yep.
Because I did think about this ahead of time. Zach Taylor would be a wild card. Not something the Bengals traditionally have done. Speaking of not, because they just gave him an extension. But if this thing kept going sideways, that's more of an end of the season thing. Todd Bowles, maybe if this thing went a little sideways weirdly.
Not even on my radar. Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to think of surprise ones. And then, could Gerard Mayo or Canales have such a bad first year that they're one and done like you think maybe Pierce? I don't know, but I think it's knowing Carolina, you have to say it's possible. I have a hard time imagining Robert Kraft would do that, but it's kind of been it's been tough, man. The Patriots.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how you follow Belichick, man, especially with Belichick just throwing himself on every show and every podcast and just not giving a rip about saying this coach stinks. Like that's a really difficult thing.
Okay. That's true. And maybe he's done it more, but when I've heard people say that, I was like, no, he's actually not saying much. He's been very boring with his football opinions. He's incredible telling old stories. And whenever he's truth teller, Bill Belichick, it's always against someone he has vengeance for. The Patriots, the Jets, or the Falcons, who didn't hire him. I mean it. It's him settling scores. Do you think he loves Robert Kraft right now? Right. He's causing problems for them. So I don't even think it's truth telling. It's him like settling old scores. I see Bill Belichick.
All right. I actually love him. That's one of my favorite takes ever on this show. A couple other dark horses. I actually don't think one of them is a dark horse at all. He's like a light gray horse, and that's Matt Eberflus. And then the other guy that I think is going to get a pass because of the quarterback situation and the fact that he's won Coach of the Year twice, but Stefanski's better win next year.
Yeah. That's such a strange situation. They're another duo, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, who got contracts right before the season. They know in the building who really spearheaded the acquisition of Deshaun Watson. I think there's a lot of people from the outside without really knowing that thinks it wasn't those guys' decision, which I feel like Stefanski, of course it wasn't his decision, but it's letting Andrew Berry off the hook a little bit to just totally put it on ownership, but it really might be on ownership. So I think they'll have patience. I mean, this guy has won a couple Coach of the Years. It's crazy.
That's what I'm saying.
Eberflus. He's on screaming hot seat. So he should have been with even the Doug Peterson, Mike McCarthy conversation. If they lose this week to the Patriots, like he could be gone Monday.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I don't think they will, but I'm just saying, like that would be a bad loss, and it's bad vibes. The offense, those players do not seem engaged with what's going on. The wide receivers, like it's bad.
Oh man, no, not at all. All right, talk to me just real briefly about what I think is the most chaotic division in the NFL, the NFC West, and it doesn't feel like the teams talent-wise are all within a game of each other, but here they are. We're seeing the best version of the Cardinals. We're seeing the worst version of the 49ers. And then the Seahawks and Rams, who the fuck knows. But they all have between 4 and 5 wins. How do you see this division playing out rest of the way?
I don't think they're as far apart as you think. And now I think the 49ers, based on the roster and past precedent, literally the last 3 years, they've come out of the bye or midseason with a pretty they were 4-5 one year, they were 4-4 one year, they were 5-3 on a 3-game losing streak one year, and then they just took off. So I do still put the 49ers they're in a tier above just because of past precedent and because of their talent. So I have higher expectations that they'll get there in the end if I had to pick. But I think all 4 teams are above average teams. Like if you're power ranking the NFL in terms of talent, and like where they're at right now, like the Cardinals and the Seahawks are pretty close to the middle, but I think they're like frisky, fun, talented, solid teams, a little better than average. Sure. And the Rams have like a little higher ceiling now that I've seen this young defense come together. But in another world, I could see 2-3 of these teams making the playoffs. I think realistically where they're at now, and since they're all playing each other, that's going to be hard to get more than 2 in, but it could happen. I think they're all tough outs. Like you see that all 4 of them on the schedule and you're like, oh, that's a pretty tough game.
Yeah, exactly. There's just no easy weeks in that division. And I feel like almost every other division, except for maybe the NFC North, even though I think the Bears are paper tigers.
I think the Bears are worse than any team in the NFC West, personally.
Thank you. Okay. All right. That's how I feel too. And so thank you for the confirmation bias on that.
The top is better, to be fair. Like, to have the Lions and the Packers. I think the Packers, to me, are a team I believe in, I trust.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I've got such a crush on LaFleur. I mean, come on. Everyone with a heartbeat does. All right. You get to choose one head coach and one quarterback from the NFC West to start a team.
Wow. Well, man, that's crazy. The coach is the harder part that I'm struggling with, because it's just Shanahan versus McVay. It's not
Rich Gannon?
What? No. It's not Mike Macdonald either.
No, I'm with you.
Gannon's, he's doing okay.
Hey, he's got them boys playing.
I think I would go with Sean McVay. Just the only concern I would have is that he's like gonna quit and burn out or something like that. Because I think he's close enough with McVay, or maybe better depending on what you like of like as a pure play caller. But I think I like the team building and the vibes a little more. You know what I mean? As like a culture builder. So I'm going McVay, and I'm going, fuck it, Geno. Let's go. It's my team. I want to have fun. That's the guy I believe in. Put him with Sean McVay. We're gonna fucking ride. Let's go.
Oh man, that's awesome. I was like, okay, this is the thing that Greg and I, two famous correct take havers, are going to disagree on, and here we are agreeing exactly.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, but I will acknowledge that it's close. Like, you want to make an argument for Kyler Murray, I will hear that argument. You want to make an argument for Brock Purdy, I'll hear that argument. And I think the strongest one is for Matt Stafford, because when it comes to the actual art of playing quarterback, I think Stafford is like elite at that. He's older and more physically limited than the rest of those guys at this point. Far more mileage, certainly, than any of those guys have. But man, when it just comes to the little stuff, timing, accuracy, manipulating pressure, getting the defense to do what you want to do instead of what they want to do, Stafford's awesome. But man, I think right now Geno's the most electric quarterback in this division.
Let's go. It's funny because they really do occupy a similar space in the quarterback sort of landscape, where they're all right now probably, depending on who you like, somewhere in the like 7 to 12 range, depending on where you have Kyler. They all have strengths and weaknesses. I would have said last year, at the end of last year, it would have been Stafford, but there is something about him age-wise. Not that he's that much older than Geno that worries me. And more, it's the confirmation bias that I'm looking to have. That I want to see Geno in that Sean McVay, with Sean McVay as his coach, because I think he'd fly. You put Geno on the Rams right now, like, they'd be outstanding. They'd be great.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Sean McVay and Geno? You're cooking.
Put him on the 49ers. I think, Brock has gotten better and better, and deserves to be on QB Island. Like, I feel strong about that too. So I don't feel all that different. Kyler, I love Kyler, and yet if I'm just picking it for my franchise, I think there's probably too much variance there. There's too much of, like, I don't know. I'm sure Sean McVay would have fun with him, but to get me through a whole season in the playoffs, I guess I haven't seen it consistently quite enough yet that he would be my pick, but he'd be fun.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's such a fun division because I don't feel like there's bad head coaches in this division right now, and I don't feel like there's bad quarterbacks in this division. And you're right, it's between McVay and Shanahan. They're both scheme lords. They're both like the Madden player's dream NFL head coach. But I feel like McVay has like a personal touch to him that Shanahan is missing. I think Shanahan has relied a lot on his players and his defensive coordinators for the juice, whereas Sean McVay has real juice.
I think that's right. And I think Shanahan's probably more connected with his players and better dealing with his players than it looks like from the outside, because I think he is just who he is. Chris Long had a great segment talking about that this week on Kevin Clark's podcast. You should check that out. They're both great. And he was just saying guys have to be who they are. Like, if you're a nerd, be a nerd. If you're, meathead, be a meathead. But players, sniff out like the fake, like the bullshitters from coaches so fast. And I don't think Kyle is that. So I think his players really respect him. And I actually think he does relate to them. But that's why I picked McVay. That was the tiebreaker, was in terms of getting the whole building kind of with one vision and juice and feeling. Everything I know about McVay is that, like, that organization goes sort of as he goes, and he is that heartbeat in a way that's pretty unique, I think, and is what is really cool about, like, being a head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. We had Jordan Rodriguez on right after she wrote that incredible article about McVay's existential crisis in the year that Stafford got hurt. And, we have her on once a year, and she is, as you know, because you work with her all the time, just so incredibly plugged in, but also has a really unique ability to translate insider information into language that's really, really accessible for those of us listening. And I just came away from talking with her. I already had McVay as like a top 4 head coach in the NFL before that. And coming out of it, I was just like, dude, if this guy coaches until he's 60, like all the other great coaches ever, he's going to own every record in the book, except for maybe Super Bowl championships. He'll have all the wins. He'll have all the most points scored, all that stuff.
He seems like he'll need a break at some point, but who knows?
Yeah, that might happen. All right. Last couple of things here before we get out of here, and you've been so gracious with your time. I want to just talk end of the season stuff. Like I texted you before the show, there is an obvious caveat here with the Chiefs having won the last 2 Super Bowls, having who I feel is the most talented quarterback in the history of the sport, Hall of Fame coach, best defensive coordinator in the NFL, all of that stuff. They're 8-0. Chiefs caveat. I cannot talk myself out of Ravens-Lions Super Bowl.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't either. I picked Bills-Lions before the season.
Yep, so they're right there.
I'm feeling good about that, just that the Bills are right there. Now, do I think the Bills are better than the Ravens? No. So, and the Chiefs are probably going to be the 1 seed. So, realistically, I'm not going to really try to talk you out of that. My reason for the Bills before the season, and I think it holds true now, is I just think it's so hard to get the three-peat, to get through. And so I just like, one of these other quarterbacks it's gonna happen one of these years. And Josh Allen has a great offensive line this year. I mean, Lamar Jackson and the way they're playing, I think they're a better, probably, overall team. So the AFC playoffs are gonna be awesome. I'm not really gonna convince you out of that those are the 2 best teams, though, right now.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels like
I think the Bills are closer to, like, right there with everyone, then it seems like people are seeing them right now for whatever reason. Like, that's a good defensive coach. They've got more than enough talent, I think, a really good offensive line. I think they'll be right there at the end.
Yeah, it's gotten off to, obviously, a little bit of a rocky start just because of the injury and learning new offense and all these things. But I think come January, the fact that Amari Cooper is on the field for Josh Allen, when they were winning every game with Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir and Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid getting all of Josh Allen's targets. They're absolutely look like a contender. I don't see a peer in the NFC for the Detroit Lions.
No, I don't either. You could say, like, almost in the NFL right now, just in terms of total balance. I mean, the Ravens offense is just so good that it sort of obliterates anything.
I want to see that game so bad.
Right. But the Lions special teams, their situational football, everything is just, the pass rush isn't there. Is there a team in the NFC that can really take advantage of a relative lack of pass rush by the Lions? I think there's maybe more in the AFC. We'll see what the 49ers turn into, but I don't know if their defense is going to be the defense that they've been the last couple of years.
It's crazy that the Lions can lose a co-front runner for defensive player of the year in October and like not miss a beat. They just keep beating teams by 40 points. Like it doesn't matter. It's just, it's wild to me. And I think like there's a lot of football guy coaches out there, but to me, the ultimate football guy Super Bowl is Dan Campbell versus a Harbaugh. And I don't think Jim is there yet with that roster, but John absolutely is.
That would be fun. A Jim. Yeah, the Chargers are like a year away, but they seem to be on track. But yes, that would be any Lions Super Bowl would be amazing. So crossing my fingers that I get to cover that would be amazing.
Well, and Lions Bills, how cool would that be knowing one of those fan bases is getting a Super Bowl finally?
Absolutely.
Although knowing them, they'd find a way to tie.
Or Lions Ravens, and like either Lamar gets a Super Bowl or the Lions do. I mean, it's all good. Sorry, Chiefs fans. Everyone is just
look, yeah, Chiefs fans. Yeah, come on. We all know you guys are the best. We get it. Let us talk about other stuff. All right, smooth transition. The final thing here. Who's your MVP pick?
Ooh, right now, I'd go Lamar. But
it's got to be, right?
I actually think Jaden Daniels, for the pure efficiency that he's had as a runner and a passer, FTN fantasy, Aaron Schatz does the football numbers there. It used to be Football
They do such a great job.
Yeah, they do, yards over, I forget what it is, average or, adjusted for the opponent and everything. And Lamar Jackson, the difference between him and between number one as a passer and number two, who is Jaden Daniels, is the same as the difference between number 2 and number 16, which is crazy.
Oh.
And it doesn't even consider Lamar's rushing value. Now, I think Jaden actually would be my number 2, though. So that's a little more interesting because of the way he's like one guy completely changed their franchise. And if you look at the efficiency numbers, I don't know if he can keep it up, but rushing and passing, he's kind of right there as just like a notch below Lamar. So Josh Allen's in that mix too, but those would be my 3 really at the top.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with those 3. I think that Jared Goff is almost a victim of how good his team is because what he's doing with the opportunities given to him, like from a pure efficiency standpoint, is pretty insane to me. But it's, positive game scripts all the time. Amazing defense, best offensive line in the league for my money, incredible skill position players, all of those things. So I get it, but Goff is definitely in the mix for me as well. Look, MVP goes to whoever you think the best quarterback is every year. And I get that. It is absolutely the most valuable position in sports. My pick last year would have got me laughed out of the room. And my pick this year, if I was going to go non-quarterback, might also. But last year, I thought Trent Williams was the most valuable player in the NFL because the 49ers scored 36 points a game with him and 17 points a game without him. This year, I'm not sure that there is any player having a bigger singular impact on wins above expected for their team than TJ Watt.
Ooh. It's funny because
that guy's just winning games for them.
Right. I don't even know if this is TJ Watt's best season. And yet he's won like 5 games for them. It's kind of doing this turbocharged version of what he's always done, which is make those game-winning plays. But like on a down-to-down basis, he's probably had seasons with higher pressure rates and more QB hits and all that stuff. You're right. If I had to go non-quarterback, it's a good question. Penei Sewell, if you were going to get really hipster. Derrick Henry out
sure.
there.
I mean,
JJ.
Derrick Henry, if he stays healthy, is going to have one of the 5 best running back seasons in NFL history at like 46 years old. That dude, just pure alien. Like, he's like Adrian Peterson or Tom Brady or whatever. You just throw Kurt Warner, throw age out the window. Dude's still doing it.
Yeah, and like it's very cool that they got to play together because
oh my god,
imagine if Dallas did
coolest
sign
backfield
him.
ever,
we would not
right?
Be seeing this same Derrick Henry. We'd be seeing him running well, but it would just be on a terrible team. And Yeah, it's amazing. They are force multipliers for each other. To think last week Denver ostensibly said, let's just try to stop Derrick Henry and we'll take our chances with Lamar throwing. It's like, what a way to live if you're Lamar. And what respect for Derrick Henry, who ends up getting over 100 yards in the end anyways, when the second half of that game, they're like, actually, I guess this isn't working very well.
Oh man, it's awesome. See, for my money, it is just the coolest quarterback running back combination that's ever existed in the NFL. They're absolute joy to watch. Man, I actually on the docket, because I'm selfish, had like 7 other things I wanted to ask you about, but you have already been insanely gracious with your time tonight. So let's get out of here. Listen, y'all, that's going to do it for today. Greg, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time today. And in case anyone out there is unaware, where can the listeners and viewers find more of you?
Yeah, NFL Daily. It's in the title, like I said before. We're on YouTube too. So check out the channel. And I like you say insanely gracious with your time. That's another way of saying like overly verbose. Just like kept talking.
No, not at all, man. Honestly, this is one of those shows I really, really look forward to, and am super grateful for you making the time. So appreciate you.
Thanks, Jackson. Appreciate you too.
As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts and find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Glenfiddich Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup, and we are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. And one of the great things about a great Scotch is how well it plays with a good cigar. So once again, we do have special releases of Cigar Thoughts cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price by following the link on the show page or at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. You got 2 options. You got the Cigar Thoughts Originals, a little bit darker, a little bit full-bodied, whereas the Red Zone series, which we just debuted at the beginning of this season, has a lighter Connecticut wrapper, a little bit more accessible for someone who's just getting into cigars. And again, just $149 for a bundle of 10. And of course, you can listen to this show and read every article at fieldgoals.com. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of the show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it's an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.